Good morning, you beautiful bunch of fuckers, and welcome to my world. I'm your host, Kevin Rutherford. It is Tuesday, August 20th. We are here live. It's time for the Power Hour. I see we're getting the crew in here from Pittsburgh Power. We'll hear from them in a minute. Then we will get to your calls and questions. It's all about maintenance all day today. You have a question about engines, performance, fuel mileage, modifications, upgrades, troubleshooting, emissions, electronics, you name it, we'll talk about it. All you have to do is pick up the phone and join us. The number to call, 855-950-3835, or hit that call now button on your app. That will get you right in here. I don't have a lot today. I was kind of waiting to see what the team from Pittsburgh Power have. I've got a couple things I was going to talk with them about. It looks like I think we're just going to go to them right now. Bruce, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. I got on a little bit late, so
That seems to
Eric's on his way to his office. We've been in meetings, and so anyway.
It's only Tuesday, but that seems to be a pattern this morning. My co-host yesterday strolled in a couple minutes late, too. Everybody's really casual about showing up on time this week. I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
So what's exciting in your world this week?
I had a phone call from a young mechanic, 29 years old in Saskatchewan. He's working on a 1211 CPL, which is one of our favorite big cams. It's a 365-400, capable of going to...
Hey, Bruce, real quick. He's 29. How old is the block he's working on, probably?
It's a 1989.
So that block was around before he was born.
That's exactly right.
That's funny.
It's a farm truck.
Okay.
Never leaves the farm.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it won't go over 1,500 RPM.
What?
Said, really? And I had him check fuel restriction and replace fuel lines and things like that, because he said they look like they could be original.
Oh boy.
Truck's a 1989. So we talked, and I said, why don't you just take the pump off and send it to me? He said, well, we had it rebuilt locally. I said, oh.
Uh-oh.
I think that's a flag, because there's not a whole lot of people left in the world that can build big cam pumps.
Right.
And Pat Sharp, which is Pete's twin brother, has been here 40 years doing them. He's awesome.
Wow. Yeah.
But he said, we just had this done. I said, but there's no governor that cuts this back. And he said, well, there's two solenoids on it. And I said, well, somehow that has my dual power valve on it.
Really?
And he said, well, there's no wire going to it. I said, well, that's the problem. That's a two-stage switch. Now, this is going on all weekend, mind you, okay?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Saturday and Sunday. And then I got him send me some pictures. Oh, he said, and there's two wires coming from the ECM. I said, there's no ECM on this edge. This is completely mechanical. He said, well, there's an ECM. And the moral of this story is, no matter how long you've been around, how long you've been in the industry, you can't know it all.
No, absolutely
and
not.
I never doubt even a young person. And so that's the beauty of sending pictures and emailing them.
Yeah.
And by golly, there is an ECM on this, 1989. I didn't know Cummins had an ECM back in 1989.
Wow.
And it's got some funny governor on it. And it does have two solenoids, but it is not my dual power valve. So I gave him the bad news yesterday. We got to take the computer and that pump off, and we have to go back to strictly mechanical and get rid of that electrical part, because there's no parts for that.
Wow.
And we're looking at. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say this. was this truck modified somewhere along the line? Because doesn't the CPL tell you what parts should have been there?
CPL's correct, 1211. Same as the 1210, except it's a half a compression ratio higher, and the injectors are just a little bit less. The 1210 was without a doubt the best STC 444 there was. And then the 1280 was right after that, and the only difference in the 1280 was they went to a 3 series Holset versus a 4 series for quicker response.
So I wonder if I think I ran into something similar like this in the early 90s. I was going to buy 2 trucks. They were absolutely perfect for what I needed. Single axles, just an unusual configuration. The price was really good. They were Fords, actually, and I already had a Ford at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to buy these, and I opened up the hood. It was a Cat. We're talking early 90s. And I'm seeing things that I can't even identify on the engine. And the guy that was selling them didn't seem to know anything about them. And I took it out for a drive, and it was the worst feeling throttle I've ever felt in my life. There was a horrible delays, both accelerating and decelerating. I almost couldn't shift the truck because I couldn't get the throttle timing right to get it to shift. And I came back and I started looking, and it was an early version of an electronic Cat, and it did have throttle by wire, and it was horrible. I mean, everything, and I decided not to buy them. I really wanted them, but I decided not to buy them because nobody could answer anything about what it was, how to fix it, nothing.
I'll come back to that. I sold a Marmon. That was a 460 horsepower Cat, and it was a combination. It was a peak combination, mechanical and electrical. And unfortunately, that's what I have in my boat.
Okay.
And it retired. And the dentist has the same, identical. He's 2 serial numbers from me. And Caterpillar told him, sell the boat, because when the peak system goes down, you're not going to be able to fix it. So
interesting.
I said, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to find a way to make these things run once the peak system fails.
Yeah.
And my one did fail down in Florida, and we flew. Ethan was with us at the time, and I flew Ethan down, and we programmed the new ECM and got it up and running. Caterpillar in Florida was not able to do it, by the way. They were out twice, and they charged me both times, but yet they failed at what their endeavor was.
Oh, yeah.
But back to this young man in Saskatchewan. He sent me pictures, and I saw this, and I said, wow. So the bad news is we have to convert everything, and he's probably going to spend about $2,000, $2,500. And it's like, wow. I said, well, that's a whole lot better than me telling you you've got to scrap that engine and start all over again.
You're right.
Because now you're looking at $30,000 to $40,000. So to spend $2,500, and then he sent me pictures today, and it's a B model Caterpillar. It's a beautiful truck that never leave the farm. So that was a lesson over the weekend, is to never underestimate what you're going to find out on the telephone and who's going to be calling. And we started something new here called the Part of the Week. And we take an old part that we all like and we talk about it. And this part was on my Kenworth. I don't know, did you ever do an oil change in my Kenworth? Probably not.
No, we never put anywhere near enough miles on it then. We spent a lot more time sitting parked in places when we had that. We were kind of tourist more than we weren't driving around and hitting events. We were kind of playing tourist more.
Well, we have a fitting. This is made by Femco. This fitting screws into your oil plug, and it has a cap on it with an O-ring. And you just hand tighten it. It has a knurl on it. Now, the plug that goes into the oil pan, you tighten with a wrench, but the cap, the dust cap, you hand tighten.
Okay.
I used to take and just put a pair of pliers on and just skip a little bit. But you screw that off, and you screw the hose on, and as you screw the hose on, it pushes a check valve open. So if you're at home changing oil and you've got to drain 10-gallon and using 5-gallon pails, you can fill up 1 5-gallon, then you just slightly back off the hose. The flow will stop. You slide that bucket out, you slide the next bucket in, and turn the hose back on, and it'll fill the second bucket. You will not spill a drop of oil in your garage floor or on your gravel driveway.
There you go.
I love this thing.
Yeah.
This thing used to be pretty economical. It was like $40 back 35 years ago. I don't know what it is now. Maybe Eric will know. But it's a wonderful part, especially for people that change their own oil. I had one on my 95 Dodge Cummins pickup, and I was due for an oil change, and I was at the TA truck stop west of Denver along I-70, and I always had my oil in the snowmobile trailer. And I had a drain pan, one of those drain pans you buy at Advanced Auto Parts. It'll hold 5 gallons and has the built-in lid on it, and the lid is somewhat of a funnel.
Yeah.
And I could slide underneath, put my coveralls on, and slide underneath and drain that oil. And the pan was big enough to catch any oil that came out of the oil filter. I never left a drop of oil in anyone's parking lot, and I'd change my oil wherever I was, whenever the mileage was up.
That's
it just
nice.
always bothered me to run past my mileage point that I had set in my mind. But this no spill quick drain plug, this is awesome for people that do their own oil changes.
Yeah. Yeah, that is nice. That is nice. We had,
and the hose.
How
the hose is either a 90 degree, like on the big cam Cummins, when the plug comes out of the side, the hose has a fitting on it that's 90 degrees. And if you have a plug that comes straight out of the bottom, we have the straight hoses too.
How long has that one been around, Bruce? That particular item? Do you know?
I've had this for over 30 years.
I was going to say that there was a time when my brother and I were running our trucks together. We had 11 trucks, and they were scattered all over the place. We had like 2 at Spartan, 3 at RPS, a couple running local Pepsi stuff for a bottler, a couple on their own authority. Then we put some with Aldi grocery chain when they first came over to the U.S. Our trucks were just scattered all over. They were hard to keep track of. I was constantly running around trying to get trucks in and out of the shop. And we were busy. We were putting a lot of miles on them. So, and back then you were changing oil a lot more often. I hadn't discovered bypass filters yet. So I actually went and bought an old straight truck and a panel van, and we put oil change equipment in it. And we got one of the oil companies, as long as we agreed to use their oil, I don't even remember who it was, gave us all the equipment, pumps, hoses, reels, everything we needed to put in the truck. They gave it all to us as long as we bought all our oil from them. And then we set it up to do washes. So we would use that truck just to run around and change the oil on our trucks, wash them. Then when we had time, we would do friends, and, you know, we were actually starting to make some money. But we put something similar to that on all of our trucks. I don't remember the details because it was one of my other brothers who ran the truck and did all the work. But we had some sort of a quick setup like that for oil changes. I'll bet it was the same thing.
Yeah. It makes a messy job an easy job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you pull a regular drain plug and there's 10 gallons of oil, and it should be hot, you can't get your hand away fast enough.
Right.
It fills up a 5-gallon pail really quick.
Yep.
And then you've got to try to slide a 5-gallon pail out of the way and an empty 5-gallon pail in underneath. You can't do it without getting it on your garage floor or in your driveway.
Well, and if it's gravel, it's hard. If it's concrete, it's hard. If it's gravel, it's almost impossible. I mean, trying to get the one out of the way and
right.
I'll bet it was the same thing we were using.
Okay. And then Ryan sent me a picture. He's got a Dabco. He's got a Peterbilt. I don't know which engine. I don't know how many miles. He's been using the max mileage catalyst for 75,000 miles. 0 emission problems, he said. But he's got these black specks in his Dabco. And he's wondering if it's Asphalt Tee. The people at the Peterbilt dealer thought it was algae. I'm going to send this picture off. Dr. Jane Gates and see what she has to say about it.
Okay.
But it's either a hose that's coming apart. It looks like the little black specks of hose.
Oh yeah.
Or algae or asphalt. I'm trying to think back on when Asphalt Tee was a problem. It didn't really show up as specks, did it? Wasn't the fuel just dark?
And if you had any kind of a buildup, it was always down at the bottom of everything. It would build up at the bottom of filters. It was heavy, and it was, if there was,
right.
And it was usually sticky. Once you could get a filter apart, algae tends to be slimy and slippery, and Asphalt Tee tends to be stickier, almost like tar, and it'll drop down into the bottom of the filter. This does sound more like a hose coming apart.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the black specks from algae are its waste, because algae is a living organism. But these are all different shapes and sizes. You would think that if it was a waste, it would be little pieces that would be circular.
Right.
Or like,
at least consistent.
Maybe like,
yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
All right. Well,
so that's what I have.
I hear Eric and Leroy breathing in the background. Well, Eric might be breathing. I'm not sure about Leroy. Hey, Eric, is Leroy breathing this morning?
Let me throw some water at him. We'll
find
out. Yeah, I got the sniffles today, so it might be me.
Whatever started you guys picking on Leroy?
I don't know.
They're just mean. I don't.
That could be.
He's an easy part.
I've been told I'm just mean. I've been told I've been called a bully. That's what I get called a bully a lot. Can you believe that?
You get called a bully?
Yeah. Can you believe that? You know me. I'm not a bully. I'm not even close.
You're the furthest thing from a bully.
I know.
Hey, did you get that picture I sent of your kitchen?
No. When did you send a picture of our kitchen?
Oh, yeah. I sent a picture of your. Every time I go into a granite place to look at granites, or you're walking through Home Depot or Lowe's, and you look at those things, and I haven't yet saw a piece of granite that looks like the one you have in your kitchen.
I absolutely love that stuff till to this day. We've had it quite a while now, because that was the first thing we did in this house. We remodeled the whole kitchen because we love to cook, and it just wasn't set up all that well. I thought when we went and found that countertop that style of what we did would become really popular. Granite's been popular for a long time now, so you almost always see granite in the house. And the only difference, this piece isn't really that unique. It's got a big range of colors. It does go all the way from, almost white, a really pale yellow, all the way to pure black. So it does have a nice wide range of colors. But what makes it so unique is we didn't have it polished. We had it acid washed and then just left it raw. So, and it's not smooth. It's got pits, and you felt it. It's not highly polished and smooth. And when you acid wash it, the colors, the lighter the color, the harder the stone is. And then the black is really soft. So if you feel it, the light colors do feel smooth, and the black feels really textured. But that's the only difference. Instead of polishing it, we had it acid washed. And I thought this will become really popular because it's different. But I've never seen it anywhere else. And to
me, it looks like yellow leaves and a black river coming through it.
They did
yellow rocks with a black river coming through it.
Yeah, they did a beautiful job of cutting the right piece the right way and installing it. So they did. The granite place we bought it from also installed it. And they just it was just a great experience all around. They tried to talk us out of this, because they were asking us questions, and like you do with your customers, it was a great place to work with. They were asking us a lot of questions, and we said we cook a lot, we cater, and they said, this isn't sealed, it's not polished, it could stain. And we thought about it, I thought, if you look at this pattern, if it managed to stain somewhere, I doubt you would even notice it. And you know how much we cook. There's not a stain anywhere on this at all. Nothing. It never stains.
Right.
Yeah, we love it.
Your phone's breaking up a little bit.
That seems to be a problem lately, and it's in the phone system. It's not in any of my equipment, because on the app it comes across fine, but it's the callers and the guests that my phone seems to break up, but we don't know why.
Okay.
All right. So is that all you have today, Bruce?
That's all. I'll go back through my notes and see what else we have, and I'll come up with some more things.
All right. We'll be back to you then. We're going to go to Leroy. You're first this morning.
Good morning.
What's on your mind today?
Got a lot going on in the shop. A lot of mail-in ECMs, actually. I think that's something we don't talk a lot about anymore, is mail-in ECMs. We do a lot less than we used to. Well, probably because there's just less Detroits on the road than they're used to. And the newer ECMs just don't seem to have the problems like the old ones.
Well, I will say that back when you were doing a lot of these, you did one of mine, and I mailed it in from the West Coast and had it back in 2 days, and it was an awesome tune, and it was an excellent process to just ship it out, have it come back, put it on, and I'm done. For the ECMs that you can do that way, it's a great process.
Yeah, and some reason just over the years, we just have gotten less and less of them. Now we just get a couple 60 series in here and there, and some Caterpillars. I know there's a 70-pin 6NZ ECM for me to look at some point today.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that one of the reasons you're not getting nearly as many in is because of all the remote tuners you have now?
Yeah, that's probably taken up a bunch of them. That was one of the ways that we used to, if you couldn't get the truck here, you could at least mail us the ECM, but now you can just go to a remote tuner.
Yeah, but that's part of
that
it.
Nope, you're kind of breaking up there again.
Okay, you go ahead and keep talking, and I'll see if I can figure out what I might be able to fix on my end.
Yeah, so the CAT ECM that I got in, I'm hoping it's just as simple as the last one that we had. It was an issue where all 6 injectors didn't work, and it obviously, if all 6 injectors don't work, the truck doesn't start.
Yeah.
So it's a no-start ECM. And the guy's like, well, if you can fix it, I'll send it in. Not a big deal. If you don't get it back, if you don't fix it, whatever. So we tear it apart, which is not the hardest thing to do, but they're not exactly easy. I don't know what ECM manufacturers use for glue, but that's the only glue I want in my life. Because those things, when they go together, it's like Excalibur. We literally named a Packer ECM Excalibur because it took us like 2 days to get it apart.
Oh,
it was horrible.
Bigger hammer.
Oh,
I don't want to break it, but
yeah,
it's like some space glue, what it is, but
wow.
It's tough. If you head gasket on with that stuff, and I think it'll be fine. Because we're putting I mean, we're putting ECMs in the press to get them apart.
Holy cow.
And this is just glue. It's not like RTV. This is, I don't know what's
Flex Seal. That's what it is.
Chemical.
There you go. Yeah.
The last one we actually tore apart was actually pretty easy to fix. I got lucky because when we hooked up to the bench tester, it had this high pitch but low volume whine. And I was like, I don't think I've ever heard a ECM whine like that. And it was just kind of a constant, kind of like a dog whistle. It just kept going. And I don't know what made me think of it, but I just started just touching things around and moving things. And what I found was one of the bigger capacitors on the board. And a capacitor is sort of like a voltage storage device, kind of like a dynamic storage device. Unlike a battery, it stores it through electrostatics, not just like any sort of chemical process. But anyway, the capacitor was actually loose on the board. And they were glued down with a different type of glue, not the super glue. Apparently, they just used crappy glue to hold the capacitors down.
Almost.
And it broke the solder joint. and you could wiggle it back and forth and make the wine change.
Oh,
It would go from like whiny to quiet, whiny to quiet.
wow.
And apparently that capacitor, what was used to store energy for the injector driver circuits. Because once I just resoldered, I just touched up the solder joints on it. ECM went back to working. We tried it on our test bench. All 6 injectors fired. Like, that was an
Wow.
easy fix. We
That's
like that.
Yeah.
But
So on that note,
they're
that
not
it-
all that way.
that is a capacitor. And when we used to talk about the start module, which I'd really like to get one back again, that was called an ultra capacitor. That was the term for what that start module was, and that's how it worked. You could fully charge that battery in under a minute because it was static. It was almost instantaneous. And then that's also how it would discharge that energy, and that's why it had so many cranking amps. The cranking amperage on that start module is almost double the best battery on the market. But they don't hold energy long term like a battery does. In fact, one time we were at the CMC in Kansas City, and we were finishing up a truck, or we were working on my truck, I think. That might have been that 99 Volvo. And I think we put the start module on out in the parking lot as a demonstration. And we got a wire wrong. When I was driving down the road from the event where we put it on back to the RV park where I was parked, and I was watching my voltage gauge go down really rapidly. Just turning on the radio would discharge. We had the start module wired in with the other batteries. We didn't get the isolator right. And anything you turned on electrical would just drain the power right out of that battery or module, ultra capacitor.
And then and the capacitor wants to recharge quickly. So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my voltage gauge looked like windshield wipers. Just going back and forth trying to charge and discharge, and yeah, it was kind of a mess. But it was just one wire was all it was.
Yeah, I remember those back in the day. A lot of people liked them, and they seemed like a good idea. But I just don't know what happened. I mean, I think I came in at the end of it.
Well,
But
what happened
they just didn't seem like they ever.
What
A
happened?
lot of people couldn't fix them.
Well, yeah. Here's what happened. Tesla bought the company that made them and discontinued the start module. It was a huge worldwide company that made all kinds of capacitors and ultra capacitors, and Tesla bought them, and they just dropped that start module for the trucks. So you couldn't get any service, no warranty, nobody knew how to work on them. Yeah, when we were selling them actively, we almost everybody loved them. We had very few complaints about those.
Yeah.
You know what the
Yeah, I'm
cool
surprised
thing
nobody else has made.
when I had my tractor here, I really didn't have anywhere to keep it plugged in to keep the batteries charged. And it would sit there for months at a time because we used it like an RV. And I would always have to fight with dead batteries when I went out there, and I just knew I was going to have to deal with it. Once I put that start module on, then all I needed was one of those little handheld jump start modules, like our, back then they were $100 and some. Now they're about half that. You could just about carry one small enough in your pocket, and you could start a Class 8 truck with it. You would put it on the start module, and it would pull plenty of energy off that little battery pack to get a full charge on the start module. Then I would connect it to the other batteries, which were totally dead, to give the ECM some voltage, and the truck would start right up.
Yeah, I remember them when you were talking about that. It brings back some memories of when we would have them in the shop, but then it was like a rebuild, or we'd change fuel filters or something. We'd break the fuel line, and then you would get like one crank out of it, and then you'd be like, now I have to wait, or I have to find another battery and hook it up, because you got like one or two tries at it, and then it was.
If they're fully charged, and we were doing the demonstrations in the parking lot, you would get multiple crank. Here's the thing. It all depended on how much power was in the other batteries. Because if it's wired right,
Right.
You can crank till that's dead, turn the key off, and within a minute, it will pull enough power off the other batteries again. I really thought that every truck should be built with 4 batteries, just like we've always had for storage, and a start module, and I think that would have been ideal. I still do. I still think it's a great setup. Problem now is there's a company out of Germany making them, but they just don't seem all that interested in selling them in the U.S. because they keep getting the runaround from distributors, or they keep changing distributors, and we've tried a couple times, and and the other problem is they built this one. It's actually overkill for a Class 8 truck. The start module we were selling was $900 to $1,100 or so. This one was over $2,000. It's hard to justify it at that cost.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Damn Elon Musk. Ruining
Yeah.
the world. That's a joke. That was my
But yeah.
sarcasm voice.
Oh, okay.
I like Elon. He does some pretty amazing things.
Yes, he does.
Now I will
So,
say this, and I know you guys
hey,
haven't done yet, but since I mentioned
Leroy, back on this. So you found, to fix that ECM, you found one wire that had a problem, right?
Well, it was the capacitor that was loose on the board. It broke a solder joint and would make a connection.
Okay. Real quick story. What we're going to call the ECM that was the display for my 2 Caterpillar engines failed in 1998, and I called Caterpillar. And they said, "Well, bad news is that's $32,000, and the worst news is we don't even make them anymore." I said, "Well, that's interesting. You have a price for it, but you don't have the item." So they said, "Call 10G's in Peoria, Illinois. Company called 10 grand. How about that for a company name?" I called them. They said, "Yeah, we can fix it." "How much?" I said, "Do you have any idea what it would cost?" He said, $10,000. I said, "But you haven't even looked at it." He said, "Well, it's $10,000. I don't like companies that, what do we want to call it, prorate. They have a set charge regardless of what's wrong with it.
Right.
Miller Propeller in Baltimore is the same way, by the way. Doesn't matter how bad your propeller is, they have a set fee, and I disagree with that. It should be time and material. So I overnighted this control module computer to 10G, planning on spending 10G. Cost me $287 to overnight it to them. They get it the next day. They say, "This is too old. We can't fix this." I said, "I told you what I had." I said, "No, I just spent $287 to get it to you." So they sent it back, and I gave it to Leroy and JR, and they took the cover off, and they're standing there looking at it. And JR said, "Do you think this broken wire has anything to do with it?" They soldered the wire. This is 24 volts. They hooked it up to 24 volts, ran it for 48 hours. It ran flawless. And I put it back in the boat. It's still running flawless.
Wow.
So, lessons to be learned in life.
Yes.
And we did.
Be careful who you're dealing with, especially these people that want to flat rate. Flat rate, that's what it is.
Yeah.
They want to flat rate everything.
Interesting.
So,
all right. Leroy, what else you got?
The lady at Miller Propeller in Baltimore, down around Sparrows Point, I was talking to her just like we're talking now. She actually hung up on me.
You're kidding.
I said, "Well, no." She hung up on me. I said, $7,000 to look at 2 propellers, and one was perfect. I just wanted you to check it.
Wow.
I said, "I think this is a little ridiculous. You had them for a day and a half.
Oh.
How much work can you do in a day and a half?"
Right. Come on.
Right?
Yeah. Sheesh.
So
that's crazy.
Now I know the boatyard had a markup on there, so I don't know what her charge was, but I decided I'd just never go back to her again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the way to fix that.
And you knew what caused the problem? I had a night that I didn't sleep good, and I was leaving a harbor, and it was a narrow entrance and exit. And yet on my chart plotter, I have the line, just had to follow the line. But I was tired, and the brain wasn't working well, and I went on the wrong side of a red marker.
Don't you hate when you do something dumb like that? And it always happens when you're tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And so, very expensive lesson. $10,000 lesson right there.
That's what in finance. That's what Dave Ramsey refers to as the stupid tax. We had to pay the stupid tax.
Yeah. Being tired is a killer.
It is. It absolutely is. That's a good point. We should pay attention to that. And sometimes we push past our limit. And we're lucky when something, even though $10,000 is an expensive mistake, we're still lucky that it isn't worse when it happens.
Right. When I was driving my Kenworth, or anytime I'm driving, once I take the second nod, I don't care if it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Once I take the second nod, I'm looking for a place to park.
Yeah.
Unless I have a co-driver with me, and I'm out from behind that steering wheel.
My most
second nod.
I had one like that last year when I was running the coach back down, and I was getting ready to go on that trip, and it was busy, and I didn't want to leave on the trip, and I'd been pushing every day, and then at the last minute, I had to take the coach back down to the shop, and it's a couple hours down and a couple hours back, and now it's going to put me another day behind. So I worked all that day, and then I headed down to the shop late at night, and I just park in their parking lot. They have full hookups, and then I'm there first thing in the morning when they come in. And the last couple of miles to the shop is on this 2-lane country road, and there is a really narrow metal bridge. And it's the cage over the whole top of the bridge, and it's really narrow. But I've been over that thing, hundreds of times, going back and forth to the shop, and it's no big deal, except it was this time. I whacked my mirror on the side of that bridge, and I'm like, how did I do that? I wasn't nodding off. I wasn't that tired, but I guess I just wasn't paying attention as much as I should have been, and I whacked them. Luckily, all I hit was the mirror itself, and it tore it all up. I feel like an idiot, and I go into the shop, and I'm like, I can't believe I did this. And he said, and the guy that runs the shop, actually one of the owners, said, he said, Kevin, he says, I'm just surprised this is the first time you have. He said, you would not believe how many of those mirrors we sell, because people coming across that bridge whack them every day. And I thought, yeah, I know, but I do this for a living. I shouldn't be hitting mirrors on bridges.
Okay. So, there's another moral to this story is when some people break their truck, they can't admit that they made a mistake. And it makes our job much easier if you can tell us what you did wrong.
Right. That's a good point.
And you and I can admit that we make some mistakes, and we still do.
Yeah.
And everybody makes a mistake every now and then.
Yeah.
But when you make a mistake and you're taking it in to have it fixed, just be upfront and say, man, I did a stupid thing, or I made a mistake here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, Gary, the owner, had already been out that morning early, walking around, seeing who was there and who was being checked in. He already knew exactly what happened before I told him. I mean, he saw the mirror. It's so common. He said, when I saw the mirror, I knew what happened. And I said, yeah, I thought about making up some story, but I thought, no, I should just be honest about it.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't need to make up a story. Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Leroy, back to you. What else you got?
Well, that's kind of my spiel for the week.
All right.
It was the big fun.
All right. What else we got today?
What about you, Eric?
Yeah, we haven't heard from Eric yet.
A little bit of.
I usually go to him first.
Yeah,
He's been asleep.
That's why I'm confused. I changed up my routine and yeah. What's on your mind today?
We have a pretty busy shop, like Leroy said. We talked a few weeks ago about choosing the right shop. Make sure you make a good, sound decision. Do your homework. we had a gentleman come in here last week in a Volvo with an ISX, and you could literally hear the engine knocking from inside the building. It was just, and it fuel knock. It was gear or something in the front end. We ended up pulling it inside, popping the front cover inspection plate off, and the last shop that worked on it did not tighten down the bolts for the scissor gear. And the bolts back completely out, wiped out the bushing of the scissor gear, pretty much thrashed it, and also took out the idler gear above it and the bushing. The bushings are actually seized onto the back of the gears. It's really ugly in there, but major. Luckily, it was a quick fix, quickish, I should say.
Yeah.
But detrimental. But just make sure you do your homework. When you're trying to pick a shop that fits your budget, your geographics.
Yeah.
I know we're not centrally located in Kansas or anything, but sometimes it pays off in the long run to go to a qualified shop, like ourselves here.
Here's the way I try to put this to people. Look, the average owner operator is putting 130,000 miles a year on their vehicle. It has wheels. Take it where you're going to get good service. Most owner operators would have the ability, if they put a little time and effort into it, to get a load at least closer. So it's not all just, back and forth deadhead. But I've been saying this for years. It's worth it if you have to drive, and if you can find a local shop to take care of little stuff and you trust them enough for that, that's fine. But if you've got major stuff, I don't care how far you have to drive, it's worth it.
Yeah, I think our record so far is a gentleman from northern British Columbia who bobtailed the whole way here, if I'm not mistaken. This was years ago, but that was a long ride just to come have us fix it. But we fixed it.
I drove. Worth it. I'm right up there. I drove all the way from Portland to Pittsburgh just to have Leroy tune my coach.
Yeah,
it was worth it.
Excuse me, it's worth it. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
We have a couple other trucks up too, just your typical stuff. Fast installation on a Series 60. We're going to reseal the front structure on it. Some emission stuff out there. But one thing I did want to talk today about too is our emissions full cleanup. We do a 2-stage process to this. We started out with the diesel force machine, which if people aren't aware or know what that is, it's a machine on a cart, and we actually wheel it out to the truck, and we hook up a hose to the engine on the intake manifold, and it pumps a soapy solvent foam through the engine. And it cleans out any carbon, residual dirt, any kind of soot, contaminants in the engine, goes through the intake runners, across the top of the pistons, top compression ring, out through the exhaust ports, through the VG veins of the turbo that always get gummed up, and it goes down through the downpipe into the after-treatment system. Then we add an additive into the oil as well to help clean out like the oil cooler and all the oil passages. But while it's circulating, it's pushing it all through the engine, but it's also pushing it through the EGR system too. So it's kind of like recycling itself in the engine before it goes into the after-treatment system. Then after the machine's done running its cycles, we back the truck outside and do a manual regen. And the regeneration ignites that foam into like a heavy-duty steam cleaner, and it gets rid of all of that crud and junk that you just pushed out through there. It burns it off, and it's safe for the atmosphere. Now, that gets rid of all the carbon and soot buildup, but one thing it does not get rid of is the ash content. And Leroy explained this to me years ago about ash building up. It's kind of like a campfire. And this is a really good analogy I still use to this day is you throw logs on a campfire, it's going to burn and make heat, but you have ash left over from the burn cycle. That's exactly what's going on inside your after treatment system. So the second stage of this is we went in partnership and bought a franchise of a DPF alternative dealer, and we opened it up across the street. So after the truck does the diesel force, we pull it back inside, and you do get basically a full PM because we have to change your oil and filters, your fuel filters, and your DEF or urea fluid filter, which some guys didn't even know they had a filter on their DEF tanks. But we do all of that during this process. And then we pull the DOC and the DPF out. And then if it's a one box, we pull both DPFs out. And we send them across the street where Steve over there does the DPF alternative for us. The first step is an air knife. I'm sorry, the first step is actually a flow bench, where they flow the filters and they can see how many CFM of air is going through it. And it'll give you a chart like where it should be. And I'm just going to throw some hypothetical numbers out. Let's say a brand new filter is at 1.5, and then it scales at green, yellow, and red. Green would be like 1.5 being brand new up to, let's say, 1.75. Orange would be 1.75 to 2.0, and red would be anything above 2.0. The second testing method he does is a pin test. And it's a piece of wire that he'll stick down in the substrate of the filter to make sure that there's no open passages. And he does that in 9 or 11 different positions all through the filter to check it, make sure that the outer edges are safe, and so is the inner core. Then the last testing method is the light test. And they put the filter over top of like a real bright, like almost like a spotlight. And you want it to look like a sunrise on a hazy day. You don't want a blinding beam coming up through you, because that means that the filter is burned out in the middle.
Right.
And then another test we can do, the map test, where they take a map torch and they actually light up the substrate and get it nice and hot. You push the flame out and you back it off with the gas still on. And if it stays cherry red, it's still good. If it starts to cool down and lose its color, it's bad that way too. So there's a lot of inspections we look at. Plus, is the core shifted? We just had one in here from a local company that it was so plugged up on the DOC, it actually shifted the core pressure out of the turbo, the exhaust gases. So we do a lot of preventive testing on it too to make sure. Then the cleaning process, it goes into the first step, which is called an air knife. And it's like a sandblasting cabinet without the abrasive. It's just high pressure air, gets rid of all the big chunks in there. Then it goes through a water wash, just a rinse out to get any residual pieces left over. And then it goes into the ultrasonic tank. And this is where the magic happens. It looks like a big deep fryer, like at a fast food joint, and it gets lowered into a stainless steel basket into this special cleaning solution. And it sends ultrasonic sound waves through the filter. And that's what breaks up the ash content. It literally busts it apart. And then the cleaning solution dissolves those ash residual pieces, and it just floats right out. So it cleans it out from the inside out. Then we rinse it out one more time. Then it goes in the kiln oven overnight to dry. And it even has a special cooling process. Like he has to come in first thing in the morning, shut the kiln. It's on a timer, it's shut off, but he opens the door X amount of inches for so many minutes, opens it up X amount of more inches for so many minutes, and continually, because it has to be a gradual cooling off process too. So it's a very prestigious cleaning. Then we bring it back over here and reassemble it with new cleaning gaskets. And DPF Alternatives, like I said, is a national franchise. So they have tons and tons of locations out there. If you are running our max mileage fuel catalyst and you get this cleaning process done at any one of their locations, it doesn't have to be ours. We prefer it, but it doesn't have to be. But they will give you a lifetime warranty on the cleaning of your filter. So if your filter ever gets dirty again, if you can prove where you're running the max mileage, like your receipts from it, and when you got the cleaning done, you can go to any DPF Alternatives across the country and get a free cleaning.
That's impressive.
Now, obviously, it is. That's how much they believe in the product.
Right.
I know we talk about catalysts a lot, but this is testimonials not only from owner-operators, from company drivers, from trucking companies. We have a very large paving company here, Shields Paving, out of Western PA. They buy it by the 55-gallon drum. Tons and tons. But now businesses are even jumping on the bandwagon with this stuff too, because it's such a good product and they believe in it. So I just wanted to reiterate that a little bit, that there is a lot of help out there for these newer trucks. People don't need to delete them. You just need to be aware of what you have and make the right conscious decision on what shop to choose, what products to use.
You know, I want to talk about that. I want to expand on that. And by the way, that was an awesome explanation of that process. I got to walk through that process at your shop, and they explained every step to me. I was blown away. I was blown away by a couple things. One, how extensive that process is at your shop and how many different steps it goes through in the inspection. I mean, it is an incredibly comprehensive process. But then what really impressed me was how tight the workspace is and how efficient it is, and how you guys designed that room and got all that stuff in there. And that was pretty incredible. And at the same time, you did the same thing with OPS, One of the things I worked with OPS for years and years and years, and I lost track of how many CEOs they went through. And every time they would hire a new CEO, the CEO eventually would call me. And he would call me because he would want to understand the market, and because a lot of CEOs move from industry to industry. And most of the people they brought in didn't understand trucks, and they would call me and they'd want to know about the market. And I went through this year after year, and I would try to help them. And one of the things I would just made me crazy. Bruce, did you ever go up to their facility in where the hell were they? Connecticut? Are they in Connecticut?
Connecticut. No, no, I did not.
Here's what made me crazy. We all know how expensive commercial real estate is. And on the East Coast in Connecticut, it's really expensive. They had so much space up there. It was insane. And I used to say, why do you have all this space? And they would say, well, we're going to grow. And I'd say, look, you're the fourth CEO that told me that, and you haven't grown an inch. You're still using the exact same footprint you were using 5 years ago when I told you it was too big then. And you're wasting all this money and you're wasting time. The guy that was putting stuff together was putting on, 1,000 steps for every filter he was putting together. And then when I saw how you guys did it, it's designed properly. It's a nice, tight, no extra space. It's more efficient to work in. They made so many mistakes like that in that company. It just made me crazy. They had a huge, it was like putting together an OPS on a football field. That's how big their space was all spread out. I'm like, this is just stupid. You guys are wasting. This is expensive real estate. On the same topic, though, and you guys helped me out here because I got into a pretty heated debate the other day online because somebody, and not one of my haters, somebody who actually follows me, and we get along and we talk, and he finally later on said he was just having a really bad day. But he put up a post about, I posted something about a truck. I don't even remember how it got started, but he put up a post and he said, I can't believe Kevin keeps rolling over on these emission issues. Rolling over? What? You think I can single-handedly stop the government from doing this? I didn't roll over on anything. We tried to do the best we could to help people. In the early days, and when I say we, I mean you guys. That's where I was getting most of my information from on how to solve the problems with these things. And over the years, you guys have solved problem after problem with the Dorothy, with the cleanings, and you don't stop. Then the catalyst and this whole process. And what more could we do? And I say we, I jump on your bandwagon there. What more could we do to help people use these trucks and use them properly? And then at some point, I finally said, look, I'm in on the modern trucks. We now know enough about keeping these things running right that I'm all for these. I like the new technology. I like the new comforts. I like better aerodynamics. I like a lot of things about new trucks. And now that we have emissions figured out, I'm all for it. It's like cars. We went through this in the 70s. I was there. Cars were junk. Eventually it got better. Now you don't even think about this stuff. So in the middle of all this, I said, look, I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm a tree hugger. I love the environment. I like to be out in the environment. I want clean air and clean water and clean forests. And so I will also say that I think the government screwed this up horribly. We could have done it better, but we couldn't have stopped that. And I said, I do not want to go back to the days of walking through the truck stop parking lot with my eyes and throat burning from all the diesel fumes. And I remember those days. That was a common thing. You guys remember what it was like if a truck pulled in the shop running and you left it in there too long. It was awful.
Sure.
And when I said that, do you know what his response was? Oh, but you like to breathe those Regen fumes. Well, wait a minute. If the system's working right, there aren't any fumes, are there?
Correct.
That's the way I understood it. There should be very little or no fumes whatsoever if the system is working right. And if the system is spec'd and maintained properly, what percentage of time that the engine is running is the regen even happening? Less than 1%, right?
Yeah.
So
Al Hemerson said that his regens on the X15 were about 2 minutes.
yeah,
And
right.
as the engine got closer to 500,000 miles, his regens could be 3 minutes. And they were very, very
So
far between. But he ran the max mileage catalyst from day one.
And this comment came from somebody who's been in the industry about 40 years. I mean, that's how much ignorance we have on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right. One other thing, Eric, were you done?
I had
Yeah, that's all I have, Kevin.
Okay, go ahead, Bruce.
I had an older mechanic call me from up in the northern part of Canada, and they're still doing deletes.
Oh,
And
unbelievable.
they have a couple of trucks that wouldn't run right, and he wanted me to fix them through a remote tune. And I told him, no, we won't do that. He said, well, you're the king of deletes. I said, I am not. I said, we don't do those anymore. We haven't done them for years. I said, he said, well, the trucks won't run if you don't do it. I said, oh, but they will run. And a proper tune and run the max mileage catalyst. I said, they run trouble free.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not going to get involved with your operation up there.
Good. Good.
He was pretty upset.
Yeah. Oh, well, we stopped recommending that over a decade ago. And it was only recommended for a very short period of time because we were kind of desperate back then and we didn't know what else to do. And people were losing their businesses over it. I remember those days.
Well, yeah, no, there was no max mileage.
Correct, right.
We didn't have Dr. Jane Gates at that time.
Yeah, and in the
So-
very beginning, we didn't have any of these cleaning processes. We didn't have any of that stuff, and that's what I mean about how the government kind of screwed this up. They forced their hand. The OEMs didn't have time to prepare right, and it could have been handled better.
Right.
But I was never against cleaning up emissions, and I'm still not. I'm fine with that. I just wish we would use a little common sense when we do it, but the government doesn't do anything with common sense. So one more topic, and then we're going to get to the calls because we've got them piled up on us. I've been covering electric vehicles and trucks and all that from day one. I'll continue to do it, and all the alternative fuel trucks. My biggest complaint on all of them, I just posted this again the other day. They did a puff piece on this natural gas X15, making it sound like it is the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's a marketing piece. It's a puff piece. And I get it. OEMs are going to do that. They pay other companies to write this stuff. Put all those out you want, but put out something that gives us some cost and some real performance numbers. And they never do on these trucks. We never find out what it's costing to run them with fuel, what maintenance costs are going to be. So that was my biggest complaint on that, and still is. But did you guys see what happened with that Tesla truck on I-80 on the west?
I heard about it briefly. Go ahead and tell us.
Shut down the highway for hours and hours and hours. Major response because the batteries caught on fire on this Tesla truck. Interstate shutdown, bringing in helicopters and play. And you know how bad fires are out in the West. I mean, it's our it's our biggest issue out in the West in the summertime is worrying about fires. We had the giant Eagle Creek fire right behind us several years ago. It's a big deal out here. We are under total burn bans all summer long. Not allowed to burn anything outside whatsoever. And yet now we've got these vehicles that are starting some pretty massive fires on the side of highways and they can't put them out.
So even the foam won't put it out because it's not using oxygen to burn. Am I correct?
Yeah, they're very, very difficult to put out. And that's what we're starting to see.
And did the driver get out of the truck in time?
I think so. I didn't really get into all the details on it, but I've seen more of, I've been reading more of the response and how many resources have had to gone in to try to put this fire out, not to mention a major interstate shutdown.
Right.
We just had one here. Now, it wasn't an electric truck, but I have a feeling it was an emission system fire a couple miles from us. Truck caught on fire on the side of the road and shut down the interstate for a day. And
Right.
Bruce, you know what it's like here in the gorge.
Right.
We only have 2 roads in and out. And to get to the other road, you got to cross the river.
Right.
And getting across the river, we only have 3 bridges in a 60-mile span. So when you're on the Oregon side and there's a fire over here and it closes the interstate, there is no easy way around. When we had the big fire,
We need to send you some bridge builders from Pittsburgh. We have plenty of bridges
yeah,
here.
you're not kidding. I spent a lot of time trucking.
In fact, our neighbor right here in the industrial park builds bridges.
Is that right?
Raymond Construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
They use catalysts. They use the Maximali's catalyst.
We're not all that different. Portland has 2 major rivers coming through it. You have 3. Portland has 2 major rivers that go through the city. So we've got a lot of bridges in Portland. And that's where the first bridge is to cross over to Washington and Vancouver. So that's call that 0-mile marker. The next place you can cross over into Washington is in our town, which is at the 47-mile markers. That's 47 miles to get to the next bridge. And then we've got another 20-some miles to get to the 3rd bridge that you could cross. And then after that, I don't even know. There's not much out there. But yeah, 3 bridges and over 60 miles is the only way across the river.
So let's go back to the Tesla truck. What was the range on that at 80,000 pounds?
See, that's the problem. All we know are the numbers that Tesla puts out. And we know all the OEMs are going to exaggerate their numbers. They're going to give us absolute best case scenarios. What I want to know a third-party trucking company that's running these, and I want to get their data. Nobody puts anything out.
And what's the cost of the truck?
That's even hard to figure out. I know originally when Tesla first announced in like 2017 or 18, whatever year that was, they had 2 models. And just like their cars, it's based on range. If you pay more to get more battery and more range. But back then, their lower model truck, which they claimed had a range of like 300 miles, was $150,000. It was not outrageously expensive at all. It was right in line with any other truck you would buy. The high mileage version, which they claimed 500-mile range on a full charge, was $180,000. Now, here's the other thing they claimed, and it started to make sense. If you got 500 miles out of your first full charge, then you could get 80% battery recharge in just 30 minutes. Now, that gives me another 400 miles. I have to take a 30-minute break as a driver every day anyway. I started looking at it saying, wait a minute, you could make this make sense if those numbers are accurate. You drive 500 miles, you take a 30-minute break, you have more than 400 more. That's more than you're allowed to drive in a day it wouldn't work for a team. You'd be stopping, 30 minutes twice every 24 hours. But a single driver, you couldn't outdrive the limits if they were correct. But we don't know how they are going to work in the real world. We know heat affects it, cold affects it. Lots of things are going to affect that range. And whether it's natural gas, hydrogen, electric, all these alternative fuels, we're just not getting any real world data out of anybody. And the one time that
you've seen what it cost,
the one time that I got data on a hydrogen electric truck from a third-party company, not from the manufacturer. Company bought several of these and they were running them, and they had put quite a few miles on them. And here's what they had to do. They had to have a mobile fuel truck because there are no hydrogen stations to fuel these things. So this test was set up with a mobile fuel truck that would come out and fuel these things. I did the math. They didn't do the math, but they put in enough numbers that I was able to figure it out. The cost to operate those trucks was $5 a mile.
Wow.
That was just fuel cost. Just fuel cost alone was $5 a mile.
So you've seen what it costs to make the battery, correct?
Yes.
All these posts and how many tons of earth need to be moved.
Yep.
And the Caterpillar equipment using 410 gallons of diesel fuel a day to move the earth.
Right.
I'm looking for that right now, but
Yeah,
it's kind of shocking what it takes to make one of the car batteries.
it is.
And the payback, they say it takes 3 or 5 years before you break even on your CO2 footprint.
And that depends on how you
And
calculate
then in
that
another
forward.
couple more years, you need another battery.
Right. And what do we do with the old batteries? So they're horribly toxic and they're hard to get rid of.
Right. Need to put them in a volcano.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Hey,
I've been dreaming on in my head like I've seen it. A life worth living is a life with meaning. I'll do what I love till my heart stops beating. I'm feeding this demon. Got a taste, can't erase bitterness in my face. Work a job every day till your dreams fade away like a